Hello and welcome to BCM300 Game Experience Design. This week, I'm joined by game designer Richard Hall.
Hello.
And we are going to be talking about crowdfunding. So I say it every week, but the goal is to keep this short and sharp. So we'll get straight into it. But we'll start with a little bit of a review about the nature of production and distribution in all types of games, really. Although we are increasingly seeing digital distribution as the primary source of distribution, there is still a tangible material production of discs and cartridges, as well as objects, of course, in...
Yeah, the actual stuff.
Yeah, and the tabletop, the analog game industry is, of course, very much centered around the global production, publication, printing, and, of course, distribution of material things, usually boxes, lots and lots of cardboard, lots of card, lots of little wooden meeples, lots of plastic bits, lots of dice. And
by volume, it's almost all, like, you actually stacked up the volume of what get made for board game industry side by side. Cardboard is the number one, cards are the number two, and wooden shapes is the third.
I'm going to put a link to some videos in the subject Moodle page of board games actually getting made, particularly the actual board elements, as well as some videos of Chinese factories where workers are cutting cards, laminating cards, packing them. It's quite. I grew up watching Sesame Street, and they used to have in Sesame Street just long videos of factories. This is for kids, kids growing up in the inner cities who have never seen a factory. And just watching, milk bottles and pencils and sugar being made. And I find the process of watching a board game being made really interesting.
It's also pleasantly non-horrifying in this case. Like, when we're not sitting here going, and now be scared and horrified as we show you terrible factory conditions. Like, it's an interesting video. It's not, we're not here to spook you.
Yeah, this isn't, the story of, Foxconn and iPad manufacture. Yeah. There's no rare earth elements going.
There's no streets of paint.
Yes. I mean, there's some dyes and some paint. A lot of this product, of course, can be recycled, even the plastic. Yep. So that's a good thing. There's still, and we'll talk a little bit about this up ahead, there's still, of course, an enormous environmental cost in shifting large amounts of objects around the planet. That is a concern. Of course, print and play alleviates that a little bit. Although you've then offsetting that cost by investing in printers and things like that.
Yeah. So
keep that in mind in the background.
This isn't my printer doesn't do quite as much damage to the environment as a Panamax.
I don't know how that breaks down.
Getting my printer to me definitely might have as much impact as a Panamax. We shall see.
And what happens to that printer once it's no longer available or functional?
Dust on my shelf like I'm a hoarder. That's what.
So I'm going to just zoom in on the production. Yeah. Once something doesn't work, it just sits in a cupboard for about 10 years. Actually, Jonathan Stern has a lovely book on the obsolescence of technologies and the kind of weird things that people do to maintain stuff.
People apologizing to machines. It's a good book.
I'm on the production slide, and I just want to kind of emphasize the way in which the actual production side of the industry is not stagnant. Even though printing is a technology that is thousands of years old, this technology is continuously updated. There is always new printers being developed, new processes, new dyes, new ways of getting the ink onto the paper. This is a process that goes through continual evolution as manufacturers, try to decrease the cost and increase the quality.
Yeah, there's a maxim about swords, which is if we'd never invented guns, we'd still be making new swords. This is true for almost every kind of ongoing productive effort. The technology for printing and production of components of games imposes a real limitation on what games can even get made. To juke from the next slide, the Shut Up and Sit Down documentary Space Lion about the production of Twilight Imperium 3rd edition makes an explicit point about how one of the elements of their restraint was having to talk to the printer, who could say to them, no, we literally don't have a machine big enough to print a box of that size, so that is your hard limit. That kind of stuff is a real thing.
I'm going to also put a link to the Shut Up and Sit Down documentary on Twilight Imperium in the Moodle, because this is a really great documentary, and it provides a very clear insight into the early days of a game that has such a high materiality of it, right? The plastic ships. And there's a moment when Peterson, the designer, is talking about how he'd bought a whole bunch of plastic ships really cheap, and for years just had hundreds of thousands of these sitting around in his garage. If
you ever see games go on sale, sorry.
No, you go.
Have you ever seen games go on sale and you're asking yourself, wow, that's really cheap. How can this game possibly be worth this much? It's because storing games safely over time for a commercial effort is a process that we call warehousing. And it is expensive to house things for long. So if at a certain point in their life, a board game, even though it's a box and you may think of it as being safe and static, that box needs to be moved. So that box needs to get to customers who can buy it. And that means that sometimes you'll see games, especially things like conventions, being sold for tiny amounts of money compared to their base price, just because they need the warehouse space more than they need to pay to keep maintaining these objects.
I don't have a lot of slides on the retail element because that changes so quickly.
Yeah.
But what you're describing there, Richard, is exactly the kinds of things that retail, what we call the bricks and mortar stores. What's the term? The friendly local
gaming store, the Fliggers.
Yeah. So, for example, when something like the 4th edition of Twilight Imperium comes out, they're faced with a choice of having a sunk cost into the 3rd edition and then having to make the decision of whether they sell that off more cheaply than what they paid for in order to make room for more stock and hopefully to make more profit from the next one. There's a lot of decision making around the retail side of the product management that I don't necessarily have insight into, and so I haven't gone into depth, but this is definitely something that you should be considering in your group work, for your game pitch presentation, and also for your individual project.
What I'll give you for free is that Fligguses have very narrow margins. There's a reason why they almost all sell things like chips and drinks. They want you to use the social space.
It's also one of the reasons why they often go out of business as well very quickly. You made a good point there. Location is also really important for retail, particularly for board game, tabletop game experiences, because you want to be near public transport. You want to have a big enough space so that large amounts of people can gather and play games. Air conditioning is very important in Australia.
Yep. You also need it to project a particular aesthetic. A lot of board game stores used to be basically very tight little hobby boxes. You can still see some like model shops in the area that have that kind of aesthetic of just like, this is a place where people go when they are looking for one specific object and they don't want to talk to anyone. And that's great for those kind of people. But now these days with board games, what we're very much seeing is a push towards getting them to be spaces for people to exist in, like a nice cafe. And that means the type of real estate you're going to ask for is a lot more expensive.
And this is why we call this the subject game experience design, because it's not just about the game, right? It's about the experience of purchasing. It's about the experience of investing in that game and in that game ecosystem. For example, a lot of these games survive on Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
So that means weekly events of, 50 people coming along, buying the product, playing the game in the store, and consuming, as you were saying, the confectionery and the other items in the store. And that creates a habit of consumption that's really important. And we'll come back to that in a second. I'm on the distribution.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that. I'm on the distribution slide because I just want to point out a lot of what we're talking about is made possible by globalization. Globalization is a term for a whole range of different forces and different relationships between what you might call, first world or developed nations and developing nations who are usually investing in factory production, and globalization has meant that there's been significant advances all around the world in transportation. That means investment in shipping, and you can see on the screen the investment in cranes, particularly, and large infrastructure projects in order to make the unpacking and packing of large cargo containers, and of course the shipping containers.
Stuff.
Yeah. Wollongong, where we are, went through a kind of transformation from being a coal town and being a town where steel was the primary product. And we have a very big port at Port Kembla, and investment was put into that port to refit it to be able to handle cars. And take off cars really quickly. So Port Kembla was refitted in order to offset the traffic going into the Sydney Harbour. And so we see lots of car distribution coming through Wollongong. So it's these kinds of investment, and China is investing around the world in what it calls its Belt and Road strategy, investing in large crane to, as you can see in these images, to unpack all these cargo containers. Another element of globalization is the reduction in tariffs for trade, so the reduction in taxes. So when a product comes into your country, it has less tax on it at the handling procedure, as well as less taxes at the sales point, in order to increase the sheer size of the number of products. Like that's the thing is that when you are shipping 1,000 units of a product, that product is probably going to be quite expensive. When you are that cost will actually reduce per item if you're shipping 100,000 copies, and that cost will almost disappear if you're shipping millions of that unit.
We talk about the idea of like automation coming. Automation's here, and one of the ways it is here is that, for example, in China, and this is not news, this is a couple of years old, there are seaports that are entirely autonomous. They are just robots running back and forth and a small maintenance crew to make sure the robots are running.
That's why companies like Amazon are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in the development of robot technologies in order to fully automate their warehouses to increase the distribution speed. Amazon, for example, has invested in gripping technology so that the robot distributors can actually mimic human hands, because that's actually quite a difficult thing to do.
Yeah. There's a principle we talk about in this space about the idea of the last mile problem. When you're moving 1 million units from, say, Hong Kong to America across the Pacific Ocean, the cost per unit to move them is minuscule. When you're moving them from that to a distribution center in the United States, again, the cost is pretty small, but not nothing. And this continues on when you go down and down scale until you get to the point where the most expensive component transport-wise that the entire trip this object is taking is from your local mail carrier to your house.
And this is why larger companies, particularly who have multiple retail outlets, can actually sell those copies a little bit cheaper if you buy them online.
Yeah.
And as this slide said, this actually, really does have environmental costs. These shipping cargo ships do consume an enormous amount of fossil fuels, and we are entirely reliant on them for the distribution of the products that we want to consume.
This is the machinery that literally shapes the world. We want to talk about the medium as the message. This is one hell of a medium.
And one of the things, that kind of connected this is the idea of the mass market. One of the reasons why we see the same type of games in Kmart, Target. What are some of the other ones?
All your big box stores.
Yeah. And that's because they are relying on the economies of scale. And this leads to very safe, established products like Monopoly dominating store shelves. However,
Uno too, by the way, if I want to take the good of like, hey, Uno's a really good game, I have to fess up. Part of what makes Uno work is the fact that Cartamundi has a distribution system like you wouldn't believe. Cartamundi owns recycling plants.
Another company that has a very extensive global distribution system, that means it's been very successful in the hobby niche market, is Asmodee. This is a French company that I think is currently owned by a Japanese consortium.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. But it was able
a moving
to
target, so by the time this goes up, that might be wrong.
It was able to start buying up lots of smaller game publishers because it had a very profitable global distribution chain. Right, it had the bricks and mortar, it had the wheels and the boats, and that meant that they could invest in content, and that meant buying up publishers like Fantasy Flight Games.
Similarly, it didn't even get its start. Like at its very, very genesis, it was not a board game distribution company.
Yeah, I know, it was a distribution chain.
Yeah, and you know what made the profits that started this whole thing off?
Was it a supermarket chain?
No. Tintin.
Oh yes, yeah.
Asterisk.
Herzog Books. Yeah.
Yeah. Very whole French publication.
Yeah, very similar to Fantasy Flight Games. They started out as the American distribution arm for these types of French graphic novels.
Yeah.
All right. I want to now zoom in a little bit and focus on one company that I want to highlight in this talk today. And that is Stonemaier Games. Now, not only because Stonemaier produces some of the most beautiful, high production, entertaining games on the market. Stonemaier is now a publishing games company, right? So it started out, I think it was back in 2011. And I'll just go on to the next slide. Yeah, with Jamie Stegmaier. He produced the game, was Viticulture. And rather than sell it to a publisher like Fantasy Flight Games or Asmodee, he published this game via crowdfunding. Now, we'll get into crowdfunding in a second, but he says some really interesting things about the linear production chain via his blog that I want to talk about a little bit. So if you're following along at home, jump onto jamiestegmaier.com, because not only is he a super nice guy with a very cool cat, and not only does he make some of the best games out there and his company produces the most lovely game experiences, he is very generous with his knowledge about how the game industry works. So I'm going to zoom into what he talks about here. I'm taking a quote from one of his blog posts where he's talking about the distribution system. So he says the distribution system is when a publisher like Stonemaier Games sells a product to a distributor who handles the logistics and orders to get those products to the retailers. The retailers sell those products to individual consumers. So now this might sound really mundane and really ordinary, but it's the kind of understanding of how an industry works that you can only get from someone who's actively doing this and can talk in detail about their experiences.
also, I think it's worth understanding, because again, we have actually basically lived through a revolution in board gaming. It's not only that this stuff wasn't like, this may seem obvious to anyone who's worked in, say, pizza distribution or bottled goods or cans or something like that, but this wasn't not only not talked about, this kind of was seen as like not done to talk about. There was a kind of general, not industry like blackout on it, but consumers in general were outside the conversation about what was involved in the process of making games. And that meant that there was a lot of assumptions about that, and the markets, all that stuff, were all operating in a very black box kind of way.
That's really well said. And that's why the internet changed this industry so much. That's why there is such an important relationship between the digital and the physical when we talk about this industry. But it's also true of so many other industries, so many other entertainment industries and industries where there is a product. I want to just, I'm just going to go to this image because I want to point out Aetherworks. Aetherworks is a company based in New South Wales that is a distributor. And, obviously someone might be watching this outside of Australia, but this is designed for students of media and communication in Australia. There are a number of these types of companies in Australia for all different sorts of products, whether it's hair care and cosmetics, whether it's footwear and fashion. Aetherworks is a distributor who manages the logistics. So if you have a product and you want to sell it in Australia, but you don't want to have to deal with going around and getting the names and addresses of every retail store and trying to do deals with them, you can just say to Aetherworks, right, we want you to distribute our product. They will, of course, take a cut, right? That's how business works. But they will handle all of the shipping. You just deliver your product in bulk, and they break down that bulk in pallets or whatever, in containers, and they ship it out to individual retailers. One of the retailers that we have in Australia is, of course, Good Games. So Good Games is a franchise business. They open up stores. So it's not a franchise; it's a business. Franchises are different.
They have a couple of outlets across the country.
Yes, it's not like a McDonald's where you buy into a franchise. They open up stores and put managers into those stores. Although, maybe I'm misspeaking there. Maybe it is franchise. But the main point is that
the fact that we aren't sure about it is actually kind of how this whole business typically works.
Yes.
Jamie Stegmaier's level of frank honesty about not only how the industry is generally structured, but how he works specifically is really impressive.
There are a couple of different outlets for games and retail games that have multiple stores in Australia, but most of them are just individual stores. Good Game is probably one of the most powerful retailers in Australia because they can buy a certain amount of product from companies like Aetherworks and set the regular retail price for that. That's why if you go online and you start comparing board game or tabletop games between different retailers in Australia, you will see some stores are able to offer a more significant discount, and that is because of the bulk they are able to purchase and distribute amongst their stores.
Related to this, Good Games, as far as their involvement in Kickstarter goes, like crowdfunding, they not only have they actually crowdfunded their own game. I can't remember the name of it. It's a physical dexterity game about hucking cards, Greek mythology theme.
I should know.
But the thing is, they also pay attention to games that are being kickstarted, and they back games.
Yeah.
So if they look at a game, they see it's going to get made, and they're like, well, we want units of this to sell. They will back things. And that's the thing that other gaming stores are doing when they have the money to do so, which is resulting in Kickstarters often will have a tier of like, you're a retail outlet and you like N units. Here is the price of that.
We'll talk more about the crowdfunding Kickstarter in a sec, but I just want to. I just love this quote from Jamie where he says, "For retailers, distributors offer the convenience of consolidation. Think of it this way. Say you want to make a pizza from scratch for dinner tonight. You can go to the grocery store and buy the tomatoes, the basil, the flour, the eggs, the pepperoni, the cheese, etc. All in one place, super easy. Now imagine how inconvenient it would be if you had to go to the tomato store, the basil store, the flour store. Right, so this is capitalism 101, but it's really important because of the amount of time and money that you save through the additional costs of consolidation. For publishers, he says distributors are super helpful because it means we only need to handle the transaction of a dozen customers, the distributors, a few times a month instead of hundreds of customers every day. The difference in the scope of sales and time is immense, especially considering the worldwide reach of distributors, despite the need of a single origin point. So this is really important, right? The publisher doesn't want to deal directly with the customer because they're focusing on producing content. It's different now for, say, companies like Netflix, where the distribution and the consumption point is one and the same. But this is what happens with film. Even big blockbuster movies like Marvel movies, right? That Disney produces them, but then they have to get that distributed. Now, obviously, they'll have shares in the distribution company and the exhibition company, but there are laws against owning that.
Yeah, and
to separate.
Because there was a period where they had that consolidation, and it led to
monopoly,
terrible monopolies, and people dying, hundreds of people dying.
Yeah,
it's messed up.
So we're going to start getting into what this means for crowdfunding and an alternative approach to the mainstream mass market production and distribution approach. But I just want to point out that Jamie has a great book on crowdfunding. It's reasonably affordable on Kickstarter. On Kickstarter, on Amazon as a Kindle. So if this is something that you're really interested and serious about doing, that's a good place to take a look. So let's now move on and talk about crowdfunding specifically before we get into Kickstarter. Crowdfunding works by pre-selling the product, by making a promise based on a prototype or a working edition of something like a game, but it could be a technology or a movie. It could be a service. So you sell access to that, you sell units, or you just raise funds for a project or a product that is basically speculative. This is how the Oculus Rift, right, the VR device was created was funded rather in 2014. Crowdfunding is often used in media, arts, and creative projects. Because healthcare isn't a thing in the US, crowdfunding is often used for raising funds for medical bills. But crowdfunding is also a useful way to support community projects. There are different types and a number of different companies that run crowdfunding. In Australia, there's a good one called Possible. The top three that I've got on the screen are Kickstarter, which you've probably heard of, Indiegogo, which is quite interesting because it works a little bit different to Kickstarter, and Patreon. Now, Patreon is an entirely different beast. Patreon, and this is where you were talking about, building a community. Patreon is more like a subscription service where you support a particular artist or project or community that you want to be a part of that may have videos on YouTube or may have podcasts or maybe producing art or a blog or whatever. And you pay however much per month to be part of whatever tier, right? So you may pay $1 a month to get access to that community's Discord server. Or you may pay $10 a month to get access to videos on YouTube that aren't public. So crowdfunding is a very broad umbrella term for pre-selling products to a specific audience. Indiegogo is a little bit interesting recently because Kickstarter has been quite aggressive in pushing off its platform adult content, content that might be a little bit contentious in certain political circles, and basically engaging in censorship. And so Indiegogo has picked up a lot of the Kickstarter product, Kickstarter support that people are a little bit angry with.
Yeah, the unfortunate effect of this is that it means that Kickstarter is very much the family lane for this kind of stuff, and Indiegogo hypothetically would pick up the slack and you'd get all these other interesting stuff as well. But the problem is that Indiegogo often is used for a lot of projects that are lacking in, let's say, rigor.
Yes, but this is true of this is true of all crowdfunding. There is a high element of risk. That we've certainly seen many video game development projects that were never completed. Even quite high-profile people fall victim to raising a lot of crowdfunding resources and then never delivering on what they promise. And that's the risk that you accept when you go through these platforms. So let's focus on Kickstarter because I love Kickstarter. I make no bones about that. I've over the past 10 years now, I've invested quite a lot of money in my hobby, right? In my pursuit of board game experiences. And
you're guilty as well.
I've been able to fund the type of speculative projects that you wouldn't normally get through bricks and mortar stores because they're too big, they're too experimental. That there's not a big market. People
who aren't part of conventional structures.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a project that I've backed that is that's a traditional Inuit game being developed by a group of traditional Inuit creators as a conventional board game, and there just aren't a lot of people they can meet with up in Nunavut to talk about making these games.
One of my favorites, I invested in U-Boot, which is a German game, which is about the German submarine in World War II, and which destroyed a lot of Allied boats. And this product probably wouldn't be available outside of Germany normally. Actually, it's Polish. Sorry, it's a Polish game.
Yeah, and notably, it would have a hard time normally getting picked up by German publishers because German board game publishers are naturally very leery about publishing things that glorify Germans in World War II.
Yeah, it's and once you play it, you realize this isn't glorification, right? It's a really difficult game, and it shows you the struggle of that experience. So back in 2013, Kingdom Death Monster 1.5.
Oh, yep, here we go.
Raised more than $1 million in 19 minutes, and this is when Kickstarter and the board game part of Kickstarter really took off and gained mainstream attention. Mm-hmm. You can see from the image, one of the reasons why it was so successful was the high materiality, right? The large number of lavish miniatures,
high production values in general.
Look at those.
Really good.
Yeah. Look at those dice, right? They're beautifully inscribed dice. Lots of cards, lots of boards.
And as far as conveying that you can get this product to market, if you can make the prototype look like this, it very clearly communicates confidence.
And it was after this point that board games became the top seller on Kickstarter. So Kickstarter, does other things. It does movies and T-shirts and technologies and stuff. But year after year now, board games are the best selling and most successfully completed projects on Kickstarter. That's the main thing. They have a really great record of successfully completed projects. And so games overtook films as the largest Kickstarter category in 2013. and it resulted in games like Cthulhu Wars, or Cthulhu Wars, however you want to say it. I really wished I'd got in on this one. I was moving at the time, and I didn't have the disposable income to invest in all those beautiful miniatures.
And by the way, this picture might have conveyed the scale. Those miniatures are about the same size as my hand.
They're enormous,
not my hand. Both of my hands together in a fist.
Yeah.
I physically handle this game. This thing takes a table. It is immense.
You can now buy it online through the publisher's website. But one of the things about the Kickstarter is that you often get quite a big discount, and you often get exclusive items. We could go into much bigger detail, and maybe we'll do this in class on Thursday and actually look at how a campaign is run and the way tiers operate and the way the more it gets funded, the more stuff you get by investing in it. It's
by the way,
it's quite cool.
That name, Sandy Peterson?
Yes.
One of the developers of the original Doom.
Yes. It has a Doom flavor to it.
Yeah.
So currently at the moment, the number one product on Kickstarter, the most funded product, most successful product on Kickstarter, most successful board game is FROSTHAVEN. FROSTHAVEN is the follow-up to Gloomhaven, which month after month is the most highly ranked board game on Board Game Geek. It is a lovely kind of hybrid role-playing tabletop game experience. And just to show you how popular it is, 83,000 backers pledged over $12 million. Oh, that's nearly $13 million.
Yeah, it's not done yet.
It's not done yet. It's past its first 60 days. So you can now buy it, but the 30-day campaign of Kickstarter. So Kickstarter usually has a 30-day campaign. Indiegogo can go longer. But there's often a lot of things attached to the 30-day campaign in terms of the amount of labor that goes into the social media work. Like, you've got to attract a lot of attention. A lot of people get on early, and then there's a huge spike of people around the 30-day mark as people want to jump on. But that's an astonishing result for a board game. Absolutely astonishing. We've talked a lot about exploding kittens in this subject. 219,000 backers pledging $8.8 million in 30 days. Now, obviously, Exploding Kittens has a very popular website attached to it, but that's still a remarkable product. And another Kickstarter project that I really wish I'd invested in is Fireball Island. I didn't get on this one at the time. 23,000 people buying this game, spending more than $2.8 million out of a goal of just 250,000. That is an astonishing success.
Yeah.
And because of that distribution chain we were talking about, right? This approach is not cutting out retailers entirely, because, as Richard was saying, retailers like Good Game will actually support the Kickstarter in order to get units. So this is not cutting out retailers, but it is a direct connection between what Jamie Stegmaier was saying in terms of the publisher, the distributor, and the consumer. So
bear in mind, publishers also benefit from Kickstarters, because they will often approach Kickstarters that have been successful and said, hey, you've had a successful thing, you've made a quantity of money, we would like to bring in even more personnel and help you lift this up. And that's happened to some Kickstarters that have made money, realize they haven't had enough money, and then a publisher has helped them get over the line.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Because, and when you say hasn't had enough money, that's because, rates for global distribution can change. Companies can go out of business, and so suddenly that quote you had on fulfilling that delivery disappears, and you have to spend more money to get that, or that that particular manufacturing process for that particular plastic or wooden component that you had, the machine is broken, and now it's going to cost you twice to go to a competitor. These things happen all the time. And there
are still disasters in this field. Do not get me wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't just printing money. There's a lot of work and a lot of labor and a lot of love that has to go into this. I also want to point out, Jamie Stegmaier again, because Stonemaier Games is no longer using crowdfunding. They've had a series of really successful games on crowdfunding, and that helped them establish themselves as a publisher that now no longer needs to use this market. So it's a great stepping stone if you're an entrepreneur or if you're setting up a company in order to deliver a product to an audience, that you can then roll that into into a more traditional publisher type experience. I just want to.
Which also has Jamie getting out of that pool, which is generally seen as one of the other ways in which he's kind of a stand-up guy.
Yes, he could have kept going with Kickstarter, and
Reaper does.
Yeah.
Oh, Reaper or not?
Yeah.
There are two companies that are known for this.
Exactly, and whether or not you think that's good or bad, that's your view of business. I really like this quote, and I'm going to read it out because it gives you an insight into the kind of production costs that's involved in board games that you don't quite get anywhere else. So he says, a game that costs $40 to make, that's a really high manufacturing cost, but I wanted to have an abundance of supremely beautiful components. To sell it via the traditional model, this game would require at least a 200 MSRP. Now, that in American at the moment, 200 MSRP would be about $400 Australian. That is a huge investment because distributors will buy it from me at about a 60 to 65% discount. That may seem like a nice profit margin, but if I want to reprint the game, at best I break even until I eventually decide not to reprint the game. And this doesn't even factor in the sunk costs like art, graphic design, 3D modeling, licensing fees, etc. By selling directly to consumers via something like Kickstarter, it allows Monolith to create a Kickstarter MSRP that is more appealing to consumers than a retail MSRP, and they don't have to sacrifice quality. But then there's also that other element that we were talking before about economies of scale, that once you have a really successful Kickstarter product, you can then sell that on to retailers for a lower price because the profit margin is so big, because the number of sales is so big. So this is, we're talking real just economics now.
Yeah, and if you're in marketing or econ or anything like that, this is all going to be connected. And indeed, if your presentations or your digital artifacts want to focus on things like the economics or distribution of board games, that's a perfectly valid subject.
I'm going to move on from the last slide. There's just a couple of examples there. This is for the Prezi so that you can explore and just it really highlights the idea that Kickstarter produces game experiences that you might not otherwise get in the mass market or in the niche hobby game market. All right, that brings us to the end of this chat today. We managed to get it in under 45 minutes, which is awesome.
Hey!
Thank you, Richard, for your contribution today. As always, I really appreciate it.
And we'll be able to talk more about the specifics in the seminars.
Looking forward to it. So we will see you in the seminar, and remember to play more games. Bye.
Thanks and bye.
Bye.